I'm here to share with you about the Alchemist archetype and alchemy. My name is Stacy Couch and my website is wildgratitude.com. One thing that's really important in working with the Alchemist archetype is understanding, the basic definition of archetypes is that all archetypes are universal. They are found throughout human history on every continent and every culture. So, to understand the alchemist archetype, we need to broaden our understanding of the origins of alchemy itself, the practice of alchemy itself. Because most of the time in modern day culture, we're fed the story that alchemy is a European invention from the Enlightenment, sometime around the 16th, 17th, 18th centuries. And this couldn't be further from the truth. Alchemy actually has its origins going thousands of years back, not further, right? And first let's stop and I'll give you a rough definition of what alchemy is. It's more than the transformation of lead to gold. That is a gross oversimplification. It drives me kind of mad at this point, actually. And it's actually very much about the creation of a noble or divine or sacred substance by transforming a base metal or material into a divine one. And you do this via a ritual or ceremony. There is spirituality involved. Alchemy is the combination of science and spirituality. Alchemy involves a series of operations using the elements, especially fire, to create a natural transformation of materials in an unnatural time frame. So, alchemy is about working on actual substances in the world, and it's also about doing the inner work of transformation on the self. Both happen at the same time in alchemical work. And for a lot of philosophers and theologians, alchemy is the study of the work of the divine, of the higher power. It's about the redemption of man, the redemption of matter in the world. It's also a study of ways to possibly reach immortality and what do we know about resurrection and the soul. So you see, it's a lot of big, broad questions that can't be owned by a certain civilization at a certain period of time. It's something that goes back on every continent around the world. In typical archetypal fashion, the origins of alchemy are really untraceable. There's a bunch of different theories and ideas about this, and I'll share some of them. But I really want to highlight the point that it comes from a bunch of different places. It arose on all the continents around the earth at around the same time and has been in circulation ever since, which is what archetypes do, right? That's how they operate. According to Marie-Louise von Franz, who is one of the prominent scholars in the field of alchemy, or was, she is a contemporary of Carl Jung. She says that alchemy originated from Greek philosophy, Egyptian technology, and Mesopotamian astrology. She calls it a meeting of Greek philosophy and Egyptian experimentation practices in Ptolemaic Egypt. Others say that alchemy could have originated or arisen first in China, India, or even Egypt. Most scholars kind of lean towards China and India. Well, we have a lot of documentation from those parts of the world in terms of historical records and not other parts of the world. Either way, it's interesting to think about, China and India were quite linked. There was a lot of exchange of information between those two places. And so alchemy was developed and evolved quite extensively in those regions. And, a couple thousand years ago, we're talking. And then it evolved, there's the alchemy we know in Egyptian times where they were working with metallurgy and sacred rituals to make bracelets and jewelry, other implements for their tombs and for their pharaohs. And also embalming is very much an alchemical practice as well, very much about spirituality. Why, if you didn't have a spirituality, why else would you go to all of these lengths to preserve a human body after death? Then, I'm kind of skipping forward in time and in history, but then we come to what Europe knew as the Middle or the Dark Ages, which was a time of information decline, a decline in academia and scholarship and knowledge. At the same time, in the Arabic world, there was a huge Islamic renaissance going on, and alchemy experienced leaps and bounds of in terms of its evolution and understanding, and the experimentation and the plethora of writing that was done about it. There's a huge body of work from the Arabic world around that time of alchemical practices and knowledge and discoveries going on. And then, interestingly enough, as Europe began to come out of the Middle Ages, they became interested in alchemy again, because there was some early interest, of course, that came up from Greece, and the Christian Church or Catholic Church actually paid scholars to go into the Middle East and retrieve alchemical texts and bring them back and translate them. This was an activity condoned by the church at post, in the end towards post of the Middle Ages. Pretty crazy to think about, because what most of you probably know about alchemy is it's something that was banned and discredited by the church later on, by the Christian church later on. And then, of course, science came and then discredited it further. So that's bringing us into current day history. I also want to bring in, though, that there were smiths and alchemists, and they had varying different names on other continents. And so, in my class on the Heart of the Alchemist archetype, I go into examples of alchemy throughout the continent of Africa, throughout the continent of South America. It's all over the place. Wherever people were working with fire, they and were creating metal implements, it had a spiritual element to it. It had more than an element, it had a spiritual foundation to it, because it was so mysterious what was happening, and they really felt like they were working with divine forces in terms of the transmutations that could come, transformations that could take place in alchemical work. So that's a bit about the history of alchemy, and really want you to understand that the alchemist archetype goes back thousands of years, and that's what archetypes do, and it's on every continent, and that's what archetypes do. So I mentioned my course on the Heart of the Alchemist archetype, and in that course I go through an extensive history and give lots of examples, so you really get a feel for what was going on in alchemy in these different places, and that helps you understand the perspective and the engagement of the alchemist archetype throughout human history. I'm currently having a launch sale on the Heart of the Alchemist archetype course. It's a over 8 hour long audio course on demand. You can do it at your own speed, whatever works for you. There's a 7+ page workbook that's included, you can download, and tons of references, because I spent years researching all of this and putting it all together, from this unique perspective of not this narrow view as alchemy is something owned by the Europeans for a couple hundred years in human history, but in this broader view of what it means to work with the materials in nature and to help transform them and transform yourself at the same time in this process of the alchemical work. So I put a link below in the comment or in the description of the video, and I look forward to hearing what you think. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or thoughts, and look forward to the next time we get to be together. Thanks so much.